I've also been watching, in some despair and as at great a distance as I can, the election campaigning in Britain for the general election on December the 12th. And also, I keep a constant watch every day on happenings in the United States. And you see the common themes. And the main one that really stands out is the hijacking of what has become known as the political left. This does not mean what it used to. I was brought up in a house in Leicester, a council house, used to rent it off the council. And my father always voted Labour, the left. And this was something that was almost done by reflex action. He couldn't stand the Conservative Party, and he has a lot of good reason for that, given what the Conservative Party did in government during his long lifetime. He was well into his 80s when he died. So that's how it was. And he was cynical about some aspects of the Labour Party, especially its leaders during the period of Harold Wilson, who was Prime Minister for a long time, and others. But there were people in that party that stood up for the rights of the poor, working people as they're called, who basically do the jobs and are not the executives and the management. And they also stood up for freedom of speech. The left in that period was very much demanding freedom of speech. This was especially the case in the United States when the left, if we remember, during the 1960s, was a big campaigner for freedom of speech. You had big protest rallies at places like Berkeley, where young people were demanding freedom of speech. This is all in that period, of course, when the great protests were underway against the Vietnam War. And that's what, in my younger days, attracted me to what was then called the left, which I could say is not the left that we see today, overwhelmingly, because of freedom of speech and fairness, justice. I don't believe in having equal outcomes for everybody, because that drives everyone down to the bottom. But what I absolutely believe in is equality of opportunity. So no one is in a situation where they are going to have less opportunity in their lives because of their income bracket, because of their race, because of their religion, whatever. So I was a supporter of what's now known, but not really expressed, as inclusivity. So that was where I was coming from, and that to a large extent, not totally, was where the left was coming from. Whoa, not anymore. It's been woked. And there's a scam going on, which the great majority of people on the left who are foot soldiers for the scam themselves will have no idea it's a scam. They've just been indoctrinated to believe that this is the way things should be without taking a step back and asking a few questions. Like, why, if I'm a radical, quote, progressive of the left, why do billionaires and billionaire corporations support me? Because surely in the situation of the left demanding inclusivity, equality, and all that stuff, the billionaires wouldn't want that. They're doing very well with inequality, thank you very much. Massive, staggering levels of inequality. They might ask why billionaires who have spent decade after decade using their money to manipulate politics all over the world, like George Soros and his Open Society Foundations, that means No Borders Foundations, which is actually what this elite want. Why would he, who screws the poor with his financial manipulation to make him richer and richer and richer, why would he put fantastic amounts of money into the left? And if the wokers don't ask these questions, and they're not, then they're going to be simply used to create their own lifelong dystopia, which is what is happening now, not least through the hoax of human-caused climate change, which is being used to justify the centralization of power over all areas of our lives, including even what we eat. So this woke that has consumed increasingly the British Labour Party and the Democratic Party in America big time is actually an agenda of the 1%, which wants to justify a hierarchy, a structural hierarchy of power in which the center dictates to everyone else through a series of excuses, the biggest one of which at the moment is we must save the planet from climate change, therefore we must centralize power to tell you what to do to save the planet. And of course, the billionaires are not going to be affected by this. You know, it's like, oh yeah, but the left will increase taxation. Yes, they might. But billionaires don't pay much tax. They have structures, not least offshore structures, where that doesn't happen. Look at these massive global corporations like Google and Facebook and Starbucks. And look how much tax they pay in Britain alone compared with their profits. Some guy in a council house on a job paying next to nothing pays more percentage of their income than they do. So they are using the left to impose a structure of top-down control, while themselves operating within structures that protect them from that imposition, because in the end, they are the imposition. It's coming from them out of the shadows. So when someone who benefits from the way things are starts supporting people that want to change things apparently for the worst for those people, and yet they still support them anyway, then big questions need to be asked. There's this lady who's running for president, God help us if she makes it, called Elizabeth Warren for the Democrats, who is demanding and saying that she will take on the Silicon Valley corporations if she gets to power. Who are some of her biggest funders and supporters? Silicon Valley corporations. Why would they support Elizabeth Warren to do things that they don't want to happen? Because they know it's just pure rhetoric to get elected, and it won't happen when she gets to power. I mean, the number of blatant lies about her own life that Elizabeth Warren has been caught out with now is just, I mean, almost record-breaking. And so you look at the left, and it's all about centralizing power to allow the few to dictate to everyone else. It's Marxism. And Marxism was the creation of the elite, people like the Rothschilds, through this guy, Karl Marx. He was owned by the bankers, and he was justifying, in the name of power to the people, a structure of control that has allowed dictators using that structure under Chinese communism, Soviet communism, and so on, to kill, it's estimated, around 100 million people. And what is happening in the schools and universities is that this history that young people must know so they don't repeat it is being marginalized. This is why, Orwell talked about this. If you can rewrite history, you rewrite perceptions of the present. Not least in this case, you repeat the nightmares of history because you don't know that the nightmares of history have happened or why they've happened. And why they happen because of the very system that you're now saying the world must change to, out of, quote, social justice. So you see these polls where so many young people who've gone through this programming machine called education, which is getting more and more programmed in terms of myopia of perception. And they don't know, this is not all young people, of course not, but I mean a staggering number who don't know the very basics of history. And if you don't study history, you are destined to repeat it. And that's what's happening. This is another reason why the left won't challenge China. It talks about climate change and yet won't highlight China like it highlights countries that are producing carbon dioxide, the gas of life, by the way, in much smaller quantities than China. The reason China is a no-go area, basically, for the left, and why these Silicon Valley billionaire corporations are getting closer and closer to China and doing what China wants overwhelmingly, so they get in there. Because they care, you see. They've got values. Is because China is a blueprint for the world. What you're seeing in China, not least in things like this social credit system, where if you do things the state wants, you get points, and if you don't, you get points docked. And if you get enough points docked, then you get banned from things like flying or going on trains. This is happening in an increasingly vast way. This is where they want to go. And of course, by having everything linked to the internet and therefore everyone under surveillance, this system can work because it knows what you're doing all the time. And this is the blueprint for the world. I've been saying this for decades, that China was the blueprint for the world. And it's becoming more and more obvious. And it's always good, too, to understand why people do things. Not just condemn them, not just highlight them, but also understand why they're doing it. And the great majority of woke people are not horrible people. Many of them, well, some of them behave appallingly, but the majority, like the majority that are supporting this lunatic organization, Extinction Rebellion, are probably lovely people, caring people, who want the world to be a better place. But what they've done is they've bought the wrong, or bet on the wrong horse. They bought a lie which is designed to exploit the fact that they care and get them to support a direction of the world that will not only enslave them, but enslave their kids and grandkids even more vehemently. And I look at it, and this whole thing about woke, which is to be understood by the fact that young people today, not all of them have bought it, nothing like, but a hell of a lot have. And the activists, the shrill voices certainly have. We've got to understand that these kids have been indoctrinated in the schools and the colleges and the universities into this mentality systematically, year after year after year. So while there'll be agents of the cabal in there pump priming this thing, the great majority are saying it because they believe it, because they've been indoctrinated to believe it. I've just read a book. I've read so many books in the last year, it's unbelievable. Anyway, it's a book by an American teacher of 28 years who is exposing how the indoctrination works, how it's driven in America by the teaching unions, which will be controlled by the cabal. Control both sides, you control the game. And how parents are being marginalized, so things are being imposed on their kids, and their kids are being politicized and brainwashed, literally brainwashed, day after day after day at school. And when that's been going on for a few years, and it has, then what happens at the end of it is more and more young people go out into the adult world believing what the system has indoctrinated them to believe. And this is where woke came from. It didn't come out of nowhere. It's the mentality that's been indoctrinated into the kids year after year after year, which is now bearing fruit with people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in America, the New York Congresswoman, who's driving the woke agenda in America. So we need to understand where it's come from and why people think as they do. And the dangers are absolutely massive for society in general, and more than anything for freedom. Because once you are indoctrinated into believing you are right and there's no other opinion, other than yours that is valid, then you don't see the point in freedom of speech for other people anymore, because to your mentality, anyone who says something different to you must be wrong. And if they're wrong, it doesn't really matter if they have free speech or not. This is the way that this mentality works. And if you have a different opinion to them, you're not only wrong, you are basically evil. And the Democrats in America and the Labour Party in Britain have been taken over ever more obviously by this woke mentality. And it's very, very dangerous for where the world will go if that gets power. And of course, what happens is that other views, let's take political views, start to get pulled towards the prevailing view, the dominant view, right? And we've seen this with the whole climate change, quote, debate, whereby the shrill view, funded by the 1%, pushed by the 1%, so they can get structures of top-down control, institutionalized top-down control, and pushed by the media, which is owned by the 1%, and it becomes the dominant view. The dominant view is humans are putting the planet in danger by their actions and their production of carbon dioxide, which, I repeat, is the gas of life, without which we'd all be dead. And according to carbon dioxide experts, it's not that we have too much, we don't have enough. And as the carbon dioxide levels have risen, so the planet has actually become greener, because plants feed off carbon dioxide. To demonize it is madness, but it has been demonized purely through repetition. Everyone knows CO2 is a pollutant. You try living without it. And so that becomes the dominant view simply through repetition. What that does then is start to pull other people who didn't have that view, and maybe it to some extent may oppose it, even quite seriously oppose it. They get pulled in that direction. And it works like this. Politicians have to get elected, so they have to get people to vote for them. If the dominant propaganda has convinced large numbers of people that climate change is a danger to human survival, then they're going to lose votes to that whole constituency of people if they come out and say, I don't agree with it. I think it's a hoax. I think it's a scam. And so what happens is they start to change their policies to fit in with the prevailing propaganda, even though it's a load of nonsense. And when I came back last night from the interview with Sean, I turned the television on, and there was a debate on Britain's Channel 4 of party leaders in this election. Jeremy Corbyn and the Liberal Democrat leader Joe Swinson, the party, it's neither Liberal nor Democratic, so on. There was the Welsh National Party, there was the Scottish National Party with Nicola Sturgeon, etc. The Conservative Party didn't have anybody on because they asked the leader, Boris Johnson, who said he couldn't make it, and they offered someone else. And Channel 4 said, no, we're not having anyone except the leader. and so there wasn't a Conservative there. And there's been a bit of a kerfuffle, shall we say, as a result of that, where the Conservatives are saying, well, this is biased. But I watched the debate, and it wasn't what they call empty chairing someone that was the problem. Empty chairs, as they call them when they don't have someone on and they have everyone else on. It wasn't empty chairs that were the problem, it was empty minds. Because I watched all these other party leaders, and Johnson would have been the same had he been there, competing for what they would do to save the world from climate change. Competing with each other. I'd do more than you. I'd do it quicker than you. I would. On and on it went for an hour. And what they were competing for was who would do the most about something that's not happening. That's the situation. And it was testament to what I've just said about the fact that if you can dominate the propaganda, you will pull all politics, apart from those with real backbone and sense of sticking by what they believe, you'll pull them all towards the propaganda, and that's what happened last night. I mean, we have a situation now where Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party leader, who's very increasingly woke, is saying how terrible climate change is and how we must save the world, and they'll do this and they'll do the other and they'll spend all this money doing this and they'll stop that. When his brother, Piers Corbyn, who's a weather expert, does that for a living, is saying it's a load of rubbish, this climate change. It's not caused by humans at all, and climate's always changing, and this is why it's changing now, and it's to do with things hundreds of years ago, not things that humans are doing now. So Corbyn, of the Jeremy variety, must know that what he's saying is nonsense. But he's saying it anyway. Why? Because he thinks, pander to the propaganda to get votes. And in this way, you see how propaganda sets the agenda, which ends up in legislation and a changed human society.